Dear participants, now we'll begin with our next session. Good afternoon to all. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce today's eminent speaker, Dr. Mrs. Neela Bhatia ma'am. Ma'am is a HOD and professor at Bharti Vidyapeeth College of Pharmacy, Kolhapur. Ma'am has about 24 years of teaching and research experience. Ma'am has filed about 6 patents, 5 books published by her, more than about 100 publication in national and international journals with the Thomson Reuters cumulative impact factor of about 50. Um, she has guided 71 MPharm students and 4 students have completed their doctoral work. Um, Madam is principal investigator of research grant worth more than about 10 lakhs from AICTE, RGSTC and Shivaji University Kolhapur. She is also the recipient of Principal Sumatibai Patil Adarsh Shikshak Puraskar of Shivaji University Kolhapur. Ma'am's research area includes bioanalysis development, chromatographic method development, and nutraceutical product designs. With this brief introduction, I would request Dr. Mrs. Bhatia ma'am to proceed with her session.
Thank you so much, Vijaya, for this lovely introduction. Please give me a minute. I'll share my presentation.
Okay, ma'am.
I hope the presentation is visible.
Yes, ma'am, it is clearly visible.
Yeah, thank you so much. Please give me a minute. Yeah, okay. I hope it's visible full screen.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, very good afternoon to all the participants. I would be happy to share some of my views on analytical method validation. This is basically an area in which I have been working for almost more than 25 years. And with the time, as the time has changed over the period of these 25 years, lot of aspects as far as analytical method validation has changed, as well as the regulatory requirements as far as the submission aspects is concerned. While the dossier is being submitted, while you are seeking the permission from the regulators regarding the manufacturing permission for the formulations, many tests are to be submitted, many tests are to be performed. In the regulatory perspective, I would like to present a brief overview on what are the different aspects as far as the analytical method validation is considered, what are the important aspects in that. So I would like to talk about all these factors. So before we begin with, the very important aspect is that analytical method validation, you can call it as a first step as well as the last step in the drug quality control as well as in the quality management of all the pharmaceuticals. Because whenever we say any product, it is a quality product, the first thing that comes to mind is how the quality has been checked. So while the quality is being checked, there is no way out other than checking it through an analytical method. It could be a simple analytical method like chemical test that you perform in the test tube. Two, it could be an analytical method that you nowadays perform with the help of sophisticated instruments like UV visible spectrophotometer, HPLC coupled with the mass detection, and etc. So this analytical method will basically play an important role in assuring that your product is a good quality product. Without the help of an availability of an analytical method, which is a validated one, the quality of the product cannot be tested. So this analytical method validation, this is basically a process which is used to confirm that the analytical procedure which is employed for any specific kind of test, whether you are doing it for the testing the content of the drug molecule in a formulation, whether you are checking out the content uniformity, whether you are doing the dissolution testing, whether you are studying the molecule for its biological activity in the animal models, whether you are testing it in the human models, whether you are going in for the clinical trials, at all stages in the product development or in the product life cycle, at every stage you have to have a available analytical method. And since in the development of analytical method, every time your matrix is different. Sometimes you have to do the analysis from the bulk, sometimes you have to do the analysis from the formulation matrix. This formulation matrix also changes from formulation to formulation, like it would be different for tablet dosage form, it would be different for the semi-solid dosage form, it would be different from for the liquid dosage forms. Again, in the liquid dosage form you have colors, then the sugar is present in the syrups, suspensions, emulsions. So we come across different type of matrices throughout the product development process. Or suppose the product has been put into the market in the phase 4 clinical trial, then you have to go in for studies of the drug molecule with reference to the effectiveness in the biological system. Then you also need to monitor the metabolic pattern of the molecule. In the early stages, you need to monitor the drug molecule for the presence of any kind of impurities. Then you have to limit the impurities. So during all this process, or during the process of this life cycle of the drug and the drug products, you have to come across with many kinds of analytical processes, and thus these analytical processes become very vital and play a very important role right from discovery to the development of the drugs and pharmaceuticals. They also support you in the process of drug synthesis. Then they also help you for the screening process of the potential drug candidates whenever the drug discovery process is being carried out. They will also support you in the formulation studies. This will be required for monitoring of the stability of the bulk pharmaceuticals, formulated products, and also to test the final products for the release into the market. So this release approval also requires availability of a appropriate analytical method. At the same time, the method needs to be validated, because unless and until your method is validated, the quality of the product cannot be assured, because sometimes your product is a good quality product, but probably your analytical method is not suitable to check the suitability of the drug product. In that case, the blame cannot be put as far as the quality is concerned on the product, but the blame goes to the analytical method. So that's why this analytical method plays a very, very critical role in the drug life cycle. Then during this process, you have to monitor and need to quantitate many kinds of impurities and contaminants also. And in the clinical and preclinical stages, the analytical method play a very critical role. So why there is a need for this kind of a method validation? So nowadays the regulators require lot of data on analytical method validation at every step of the product, whether you started from right from the drug synthesis till the product goes into the market, and as long as the product is existing into the market, or you can say even after the expiry of the product also, the analytical method is needed, and thus the validated method is always required by the industry, and industry keeps on working in the area of the analytical method validation. So for the submission purposes, the analytical method validation data is now mandatory, even if you are say going in for the submissions of new drug application or abbreviated new drug application. So you can also say that your quality of your analytical data will be a key or deciding factor as far as the success of drug and success of formulation your formulation is concerned. For success of your drug, as well as for success of your formulation and market success of your product, also requires that there should be a reliable method available, so that you can monitor the purity, quality, strength and integrity of your product as well as process. At the same time, whenever you are transferring data from one laboratory to the other laboratory, these analytical methods play a very important role. The current CGMP guidelines also require that the test methods should be available to assess the compliance of the product, so that it meets to the proper standards of accuracy and reliability. So regulators, they define method validation as a process of demonstrating that analytical procedures are suitable for their intended use, and that they support the identity, strength, quality, purity and potency of the drug substances as well as the drug product. Few concepts we normally come across, and sometimes we take it synonymously, but there are minor differences when we say we are doing the method validation or we are doing the method verification. So method, although there is a very minor difference, so method validation basically has to be performed in accordance with a validation protocol, whereas method verification you can call method verification as a partial validation, whereas in method validation all the parameters given by the regulators, like if suppose you are following the ICH guidelines or you are following the US FDA guidelines or any other guidelines available for the method validation, then all the points which are needed to be validated as per that particular guideline, all the parameters are needed to be validated, whereas in case of method verification, you generally need to do the method verification for any kind of method which is already available, or you can say which was earlier validated, and now you are applying this method in your current perspective. In that case, partial validation of the method needs to be done. depending on what is the application of the method. So for what, with what objective you are applying the method, based on that partially some of the parameters need to be validated again, and that would be termed as a method verification. Or suppose there is a method which is already listed out in the pharmacopoeia, and you want to apply that pharmacopoeial method for your product. In that case, method verification would be demanded, and you have to validate some of the parameters for the method validation as per the regulators. Method revalidation sometimes may be required because changes do occur from over the period of time during the product life cycle, and throughout this product life cycle it is necessary that method should also be in a state of validation. Like suppose there are a lot of products like in the market. One of the products you can say like Crocin is one of the very known and one of the oldest product available in market, and say over the period of 40 years or even more than that, if the product is available into the market. So analytical method that is being used for analysis of such type of formulations change over the period of time. Like whatever method was used for quality assurance purpose of the Crocin tablet earlier might not have been used today, because now the changes have occurred, or you can say updates are available as far as the method is concerned, as well as far as the instrument is concerned, so that you get a better sensitivity of detection. And that's why such type of method needs method revalidation. Or sometimes you go in for the minor changes in the method. These kind of minor changes, they will include like if you make changes into the mobile phase, if you make some changes in the column. Changes in the column occur on a very frequent basis, because frequently you need to change the column, maybe say over a period of 15 days or in a month or so. So sometimes the column make may also be same, but if the column is different, then the method revalidation on the new column sometimes may be called upon. Suppose some temperature changes to the column are occurring, then method revalidation needs to be done. Or suppose you are trying to make changes as far as the concentration or composition of the sample and the standards is concerned, this will call upon for the method revalidation. Or over the period of time, in order to improve the sensitivity of detection, if you are making changes in the type of detector that you would be using, so in that case also you have to make the revalidation. Like suppose you go from, or you make a change from ultraviolet visible detection to the fluorimetric detection, or suppose you make a changes in the wavelength at which the detection is being done. In all these cases, the method will call upon for the revalidation process. Then we have two concepts like pharmacopoeial methods are available and non-pharmacopoeial methods are available. So whenever say any pharmacopoeial method is available for us and we are using it for our product, in that case the pharmacopoeial method needs to verify. That means partial validation of such methods are needed, and you can call it as a method verification. Maybe you are using it for content determination, maybe you are using it for impurity detection, whatever the case may be. So pharmacopoeial methods you call upon for the method verification or partial validation. Whereas if the method is non-pharmacopoeial and the method has been newly developed, has not been used by anyone else earlier, all such non-pharmacopoeial methods need to be completely validated as per the regulatory protocol. Now there are certain prerequisites that you have to keep in mind before you go in for the method validation. Like you need to define the goals of the method, like in terms of for what purpose you will be using that particular method. Say you are using it for, let us start right from the process of drug discovery. So like when you are doing it, when you are doing the API synthesis, so during the process of API synthesis, also you need to check what is the purity of your drug molecule. Sometimes you make changes in the process of synthesis, so in that case also you need to check that the levels of impurities are as per the regulatory requirements. Also, you need to check that no new impurities have been incorporated because of change in the synthesis of the API or the drug molecule. So, this also comes under what is the goal of the method. Then right from the drug discovery to you can go to the stages of the product development. So you can say you are working on development of the product, you want to make it as a solid dosage form, or you want to convert it into a geriatric dosage form. So in that case, as the dosage form changes, the analytical method that would be utilized also changes, because the method that is used for a solid oral dosage form probably may not be used for a liquid oral dosage form, or probably you need a high sensitivity of detection if you are converting the product into a injectable formulation. So goals of the method have to be clearly defined, that for what purpose this particular analytical method would be used or where will it find application. Then your equipment should be calibrated and validated. Now industry or the regulators do it as per the 4Q model that is being, or you can say that's the requirement of the good manufacturing practice. So you need to follow the good manufacturing practices. You also need to follow the good laboratory practices. Both are important because the analytical method and manufacturing of the API as well as the formulation, it goes hand in hand. So they depend on one another, and that's why this is a prerequisite that GMP and GLP guidelines should be followed. Then acceptance criteria, they should be set out as per the guidelines. This is necessary because depending on the goal, acceptance criteria will change. And finally, application should be kept in mind, like at what stage of the development you are going to apply your method. And this becomes a very critical point uh, as far as the prerequisites that you have to keep in mind is concerned. There are various regulators who have given the guidelines for analytical method validation, like you have US FDA. So US FDA has proposed guidance, industry guidance for analytical procedures and method validation. The guidelines in August 2000, they are being followed. Then there is a separate guideline for bioanalytical method validation as per the September 2013 guidelines. And then there is a guideline for analytical procedures and analytical method for drugs and biologics as per the July 2015 guidelines. Then USP convention has approved the revised general chapter of the code 1225 on validation of compendial methods. Now the WHO has also given guidelines on validation as Appendix 4, which is titled as Analytical Method Validation, and it was published in June 2016, and it also includes 8 validation characteristics. We'll be talking about these validation characteristics in our uh, slides further. Then well known, I think everyone is aware with the ICH guidelines. So we know that the analytical method validation guidelines earlier were ICH Q2A and Q2B, and now the current title is validation of analytical procedures, text and methodology. And this document also includes the 8 validation parameters and have been discussed in ICH Q2 guidelines. Then ISO IEC guidelines on the request of AOAC. They have also given the guidelines for laboratory management, the Analytical Laboratory Accreditation Criteria Committee. They have also prepared a guideline so that you get a clear-cut idea on what kind of validation activities that a laboratory needs to perform so that your method remains successful throughout the life cycle of the product. Then IUPAC has also framed the harmonized guidelines for in-house validation methods of analysis. European Commission has also given the protocol for verification studies of single laboratory or in-house validated methods. This, if we just have a look at the various validation parameters and the various regulatory agencies, you can see vertically I have given the various parameters which include like accuracy, precision, specificity, then detection limit, quantitation limit, linearity, range, robustness, recovery, sensitivity, ruggedness, fitness for purpose, then matrix variation, measurement uncertainty, trueness, selectivity, and then application. So these some of the parameters have become outdated as far as the ICH and USP guidelines are concerned, but you will find that US FDA, AOAC, and IUPAC, or even European Commission still takes consideration of many of the parameters which ICH and USP has not taken up. So you can see this chart. This will give you a clear-cut idea that which particular guidelines are utilizing or demanding that what particular parameter needs to be validated whenever you're talking about an analytical method validation. Now, what are as far as the types of analytical procedures are concerned, if you look at the US FDA guidelines, USP guidelines, and the ICH guidelines, you will see that for every parameter, they have given a clear-cut idea that what particular parameter needs to be validated as far as the application of these analytical methods is concerned. So like you can apply, if you're applying this procedure for as an identification test, if you're using the analytical procedure as a quantitative test for impurity content, or as a limit test for control of impurities, or as a quantitative test of the active moiety in the samples of drug substances, or even the drug product. So in all cases, they have given a clear-cut idea about what parameters need to be validated, which we'll see in our subsequent slides. Generally, what are the steps we should be aware of, although this does not include the part of method validation, but it should be known to us that whenever we are preparing any method or whenever we are developing a method and subsequently when we are validating that particular method, what are the steps through which you have to go, because this is a very critical aspect, so none of the aspects should be left untouched while you're planning for development and validation of your analytical method. So you first thing that you have to start with is that you have to define your method development plan, and you need to collect all the information available about that particular method, about your drug molecule, that is your API. If you are doing it from your formulation, then you need to have a clear-cut information about the matrix of that particular formulation, if it's a solid dosage form, if it's a semi-solid dosage form, if it's a parenteral preparation, or whether you are interested in using that particular analytical method for quantitation, maybe qualitative estimation of your molecule from the biological fluid like blood, urine, or in the preclinical stages you are studying your drug molecule for various parameters from the animal studies. So if you are using mice, rat, rabbit, etc. So all this will come under that you have to gather the background information, and this information should be at hand and should be clearly known before you are beginning with your method development process. Then you should develop your laboratory method and you should generate the test method first. Of course, this would be in the preliminary stages and would be in the crude form, but you have to go with it, and you will see that during the regulatory submissions or even during the dossier submission, this raw data is also needed, and the regulators demand that you should be submitting this raw data also. So keeping up a record of this raw data is equally important, and it is needed. Then you should be developing the validation protocol. As I said on my earlier slide that for what purpose you are developing the method. So if you are suppose developing an identification method, or suppose you are developing your method for dissolution testing, or you are developing a assay method, in that case mild slight changes will be needed as far as what validation parameters you need to conduct, and that's why this should come into your validation protocol. You should define application, purpose and scope of the method. You should also define the performance parameters along with the acceptance criteria. Like at what concentration levels you are interested in identification and detection. So suppose whenever you are performing the metabolic studies, so at that time probably your acceptance criteria, because the concentration that you would be detecting from say in the preclinical study, if you are interested in doing concentrations would be very low. So at that time you have to define that what are your performance parameters and the acceptance criteria. Then you have to perform your validation experiments. Like you will make your experiment in terms of what will be your stock solution, what will be the concentration of your stock solution, what dilutions you will be doing, how many dilutions you would be preparing, what concentrations you would be using for analysis. If there are multiple concentrations, how are you going to choose those concentrations over the as far as the linearity and range is concerned. So these experimental validation parameters you have to define earlier beforehand before you start with your method validation. Then you have to verify the relevant performance characteristics of the equipment, because equipment is a factor that may affect your method validation. It may happen sometimes that your method is working well, but probably the issues arise with the equipment. I can give you here a very critical example, like which we probably do not realize while we are working in the our laboratory. So sometimes if suppose your electrical supply is not stabilized electrical supply, so this can also have an effect on the intensity of the lamp, like suppose you are working on UV visible spectrophotometer, or say you are working on HPLC with a UV visible detection system. So if your supply is not stabilized, in that case the intensity of the deuterium lamp may change, and as a result of this the detection sometimes may go faulty, and that's why performance characteristics of your equipment are very critical. Like say you are working on the HPLC system, your flow characteristics should be checked. Say you have kept the constant flow at say 1 ml per minute, so it's needed to ensure that every time over a period of few hours to few days your equipment runs at a speed of, or it gives you, it flows the mobile phase at a flow rate of 1 ml per minute. So these aspects are very critical, and you have to monitor, or you can say you have to verify all these characteristics right in the beginning before you start with the method validation. Then you should also be able to qualify your material, because quality of your material is very critical. The standards, the reagents which are used for this particular purpose, they are very critical, and uh, this will actually be governing the quality of your method. Then once all these parameters are decided and checked out, and you have penned it on your document, then you start with your wet lab experiment, and then you start performing the pre-validation experiments, or you start the pre-validation activity. During the process of pre-validation activity, you have to adjust your method parameters as well as the acceptance criteria, and this process goes hand in hand. So it's not like that once you have done the pre-validation experiment, after that you will adjust the method parameters and then you will define the acceptance criteria. So this basically, these steps, they go hand in hand, that you perform the pre-validation experiments, then you adjust the method parameters and acceptance criteria. So during this process, suppose you come across any kinds of parameters which you feel you need to change, like you need to make some changes as far as the concentrations at which analysis is done, or say the acceptance criteria that should be used, suppose you need to make change in that aspect. In all these cases, these processes will go hand in hand, and once it is finalized during your pre-validation experiments, after that you can go in for the complete validation experiment, or you can say you can perform the full validation experiment. Once the method is validated, it becomes it comes on the protocol of the company as a part of quality document, and then you make it as, or you can pen it down as a standard operating procedure, so that anyone who executes this procedure will have no variation as far as the results are concerned. Then you have to also consider the criteria for revalidation. You have to think of what the revalidation criteria could be, or what kind of issues over the period of time could arise with the method, and so under what set of conditions you need to go for the revalidation. These criteria you have to define, and it should be part of your quality document. Then you need to define the type and frequency of the system suitability tests, because system suitability tests are an important criteria during the method validation process. So you have to define what system suitability criteria you would be considering whenever you are validating your method. Then finally, you prepare and document your validation experiments, and once it is done, it would be put for approval, and the quality assurance department will put you an approved remark on this. So considerations prior to method validation includes suitability of instrument, suitability of material, suitability of analyst, and at the same time suitability of documentation. Although we consider documentation as part of the quality process, but simple variation in documentation or a mild mistake in the documentation could be very hazardous as far as establishing the quality of your drug or the drug product is concerned. Then there are different examples of the method, because lot of analytical instruments are available which we probably require at multiple stages of drug product life cycle. So it's not necessary that every time you are doing an UV analysis, or every time you are doing simply a chemical analysis or a chromatographic analysis. It depends on the demand of the application of the method, that what method would be, what instrumental method would be more suitable for that purpose. So if we are choosing some chromatographic method, then multiple chromatographic methods are available, where you can use HPLC method, you can use GC, TLC, GCMS, etc. In biomedical analysis or bioanalysis of the drug products, it can be coupled with PK/PD for the pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic studies, or for clinical studies where sensitivity of detection needs to be higher. In that case, the HPLC may be coupled with the more advanced detection systems, like coupled with mass. It could be coupled with NMR, and these kinds of instruments may be required. Then simple spectrophotometric methods, you can do it with UV visible spectrophotometer. Then you can use the NMR, you can go for the XRD, mass detection, near infrared detection, etc. At some instances, you require capillary electrophoresis methods, specifically those who are working with the protein molecules and protein analysis is being done. One particular application of capillary electrophoresis lies in whenever you are developing analytical method utilizing some isolated enzymes In that case, the capillary electrophoresis methods, they are important. Then particle size analysis methods can be used like laser, microscopic analysis, sieving, etc. And now the more advanced analytical tools are upcoming, which includes automated analytical methods, like you can go for the use of robots and automated analysis. So these are now upcoming technologies, and industries are adopting to these newer technologies. Now, in today's purview, we can look at from the industrial perspective. These are the requirements that you need to follow whenever you are looking for the method validation. You need to understand, because most of the industries nowadays, they perform the validation protocol as per the ICH guidelines or USP guidelines, or if suppose it is a bioanalysis where analysis is to be done from the biological fluid, in that case US FDA guidelines needs to be clearly understood. It has to be in legal compliance as far as the GMP guidelines are being issued by the various regulatory bodies. Of course, WHO GMP requirements are mandatory to be followed, along with the regulators of individual countries who give guidelines on the GMP. Like for us, we'll be following the Schedule M. The American countries would be following the US FDA guidelines, and so on. So for different countries, you have different GMP guidelines available, and WHO has given a comprehensive overview on the good manufacturing practices that needs to be followed by everyone. Now here I would be concentrating mainly on the guidelines which are as per the ICH and USP requirements. So what are the ICH and USP validation parameters? I will just go throughout this presentation as a comparative account of ICH and USP guidelines. So we can understand that, or we can also have a look at that ICH and USP, majority of the parameters, they go hand in hand, along with their requirements are also very similar, with some minor changes at some of the other places. So ICH and USP, you will see, if you can look at this data available on the slide, you can see that the parameters are similar at both places. You can see accuracy, then precision. Precision is done at in the three stages, or there are three parts for establishing the precision of an analytical method, which will include repeatability, intermediate precision, and reproducibility. Then you have to study the specificity. Then we have to go with detection limit, quantitation limit, linearity, range, and robustness. Ruggedness earlier was a parameter which was a part of ICH guidelines, but now that has been removed, and instead of that, the precision has to be studied under the three stages, and that's why the ruggedness parameter has now been removed from ICH as well as USP. They do not require, because the parameters that were included as a part of ruggedness, now that all parameters are being covered under the precision under the three different heads. Just we'll have a look at what does the ICH and USP say about accuracy. From here onwards, we'll just go through the parameters one by one. So the ICH and USP have defined, although the meaning comes out to be same, that you have to establish a correlation between the closeness of the recordings or your values that you check between the value which is either considered as a conventional true value or an accepted reference value versus the value that you have found in your laboratory experiment. So you can also call, in general terms, we can also call it as an agreement between the measured and the real value or the true value. And because of this, accuracy is sometimes also called as trueness. Now for what kind of analysis the accuracy is required, so you can see accuracy is needed for performing the assay for drug substances as well as for drug products, as well as the accuracy also needs to be performed for quantitation of the impurities. So you will find that as per the ICH and USP guidelines, as far as the application concept is concerned, the application for ICH and USP remains the same. Only difference is that how you have to establish the accuracy data. So ICH demands that you have to do it over using minimum 9 determinations, and if you are doing it up at 9 determinations, that minimum 3 concentration levels should be studied. That means you can say that 3 concentration levels and 3 replicates of these 3 concentrations. Whereas USP also accepts that you can do it at one single concentration, but if only one single concentration is being used, in that case you have to, instead of 3 concentrations, you have to go for the 6 determinations, or you have to use the 6 concentrations. So, or else USP also accepts that you can do 3 concentrations, 3 replicates similar to the ICH. That means it would be a total of 9 determinations. But instead of that, one concentration can also be used, but then in that case, you have to go in for the 6 replicates of that concentration. Accuracy, whenever you are reporting your result, you have to report it as a percent recovery of the assay of known added amount of the analyte in the sample. So while the accuracy is being performed, the recovery studies are performed, and sometimes you will find that accuracy is also reported as a part of recovery studies, where once the assay of the say formulation is being done, in that formulation you will be adding some known amounts of the analyte. These known amounts of the analyte are added at different concentration levels, and after adding that, you need to go for preparation of the fresh solutions, and from this you have to calculate the percentage recovery of the added known amount of the analyte in the sample. So this is how accuracy has to be performed. Then we come to the precision. Uh, Precision actually is a terminology which is used to express that, because you are like we have seen it in accuracy, that we have to determine the multiple concentrations at in terms of multiple replicates. So whenever this kind of a data is generated, then it is necessary that for your every value that you are recording, there should be a closeness of the values that you are recording. So based on that precision, in general terms, you can define it as agreement between a series of measurements. ICH defines it like the precision of an analytical procedure will express closeness of agreement, or you can also call it as a degree of scatter, that to what extent these values are scattering over a desired concentration range between a series of measurements which are obtained from the multiple samplings of the same homogeneous sample under your prescribed condition of analysis. This precision has to be considered at 3 levels: repeatability, intermediate precision, and reproducibility. For proving the acceptability of the data of the precision, you have to report it with reference to calculation of the standard deviation, relative standard deviation, or you can also call it as coefficient of variation, and the confidence interval. So whenever you are doing up the precision, this data is mandatory to be reported. USP also defines precision in the same parameters with a little bit changes in the words or in the terminology in which it is defining the precision. Otherwise, overall the meaning remains the same. Now, how to do the repeatability, because precision has to be studied under three heads of repeatability, intermediate precision, and reproducibility. So you have to check that what is to be done in repeatability. So basically the term itself defines repeatability means whenever you are doing the analysis multiple number of times, maybe in a day or over the period of days or weeks or even months, and to establish that whenever you are doing the experiment again and again, your analysis or your result is not affected. So repeatability will express the precision when you are doing the analysis under the same operational conditions over a short interval of time, and repeatability is also termed as intra-assay precision. USP says that it refers to the use of analytical procedures within a laboratory over a short period of time using the same analyst with the same equipment. Then we come to intermediate precision. This will include within laboratory variations, like when you are doing it with on different days, different analysts, and on the different equipments. Say the make of the equipment is different or the model of the equipment is different. In all cases, when the method is being run, say on the same day, on the different day, or by multiple analysts if are doing the same procedure, then your method performance should not be affected. This is very important to establish, and that's why the intermediate precision is performed to establish this criteria. Then we come to the reproducibility. It will express the precision between the laboratories, like whenever the collaborative studies are done, or you can say whenever the technology transfer comes into picture, whenever you are transferring the method from one laboratory to the other laboratory, or maybe from one site to the other site. So these parameters you need to establish for establishment of the precision criteria. Again here, when the precision is being established, you have to go for the minimum 9 determinations. Again, you have to cover the 3 concentration levels and 3 replicates at each place have to be performed, or else you can go for minimum of 6 determinations if the concentration of the test solution is used at the 100% concentration. So in that case, you can go for 6 determinations, but concentration has to be kept the same. This is a simple diagram and a very typically known diagram, but I find it a very useful diagram to understand the concept of accuracy and precision at one time in one window, you can say. So you can see that in the image 1, which is shown as low accuracy and low precision, the picture itself speaks about, you can see that the black spots, they show the recordings or readings of your analysis, that you can see that the values are scattered throughout a large concentration area. So the accuracy is also less, as well as the precision is also very less. Whereas in the second picture, the top second picture, you can see which is written as low accuracy and high precision. So you can see that all the recordings are gathered in very narrow range. So the precision is very high. That means the readings are very close by. But all the readings, they lie far behind from the true value. The inner red circle, it shows your true value, or that is what is your goal. So you can see that the readings or the values, they lie far behind this goal, and that's why the accuracy of the readings are very low, but the readings are very close by, and that's why the precision is very high. You can see the recordings in the third picture, the bottom first picture, which shows high accuracy and low precision. Precision is low because the readings are scattered over a larger area, while accuracy high in terms of like the values that are obtained or recorded, they are recorded in all directions. So like suppose we consider 100% as the true accepted value, you can see that on the both sides of 100%, like below 100% and above 100% recordings are in the similar range. So when you come to the mean value determination, it will come out to be the close to true value, or you can say 100% value. So accuracy seems to be higher in this case, but the precision is very low because of the scattering of the readings. While in the fourth figure, you can see the accuracy is high and the precision is also high because the readings are not scattered over a wider range. They are in a very close circle, and that circle is your what is the true value, and that's why this is what is actually accepted or required in analytical method validation, that your readings should show high accuracy and high precision. Then we come to specificity. Specificity, this is a very important aspect as far as whenever you are doing the analysis from a mixture or when any matrix is being used. Like we discussed earlier also, if we are doing the analysis from the formulation like liquid dosage form, solid dosage form, semi-solid dosage forms, powder form, or injectable forms, or from the biological fluids like urine, blood, or you want to check that during the drug development process, whenever the preclinical studies are being done, suppose you want to check out the deposition of your molecule or drug molecule in the specific organ or in the specific areas, in the specific cellular components. In all cases, the matrix is different. When it is the urine, the composition is different. When it is blood, the composition is different. When it's a tablet dosage form, the composition is different. When it's a semi-solid dosage form, the composition is different, and so on. And that's why every time the interference that would be provided because of this matrix has to be considered whenever you are developing a method and simultaneously you are validating the method. So for this reason, the specificity needs to be done, and in general terms, you can say that specificity is a parameter which denotes the ability to measure the desired analyte in a complex mixture. So as per ICH, the specificity would be, it is the ability to assess unequivocally the analyte in the presence of components which may be expected to be present. Typically, these might include impurities, degradants, matrix, etc. This specificity generally should be conducted during the validation of the identification test and the determination of impurities in the assays. So, while you are doing the specificity, suppose you do not have the impurities in the pure form with you. Now, it is a current topic of interest that your impurities also need to be in the purest form. And that's why you'll find that those who are working in the analytical project areas, that impurities in the purest form need to be available to establish the quantitative data of the impurities in the drug substances as well as in the drug products. But say suppose you are working on an analytical method and you do not have impurities available with you. So in that case, you need to spike the pure substance like your drug product or drug substance with appropriate levels of impurities and excipients, and you have to demonstrate that the assays are unaffected even in the presence of these materials. While if the impurities they are not, I'm sorry, the previous one was when the impurities are available. While if you do not have impurities available with you, then you can demonstrate the specificity experiment by comparing the test results of the samples which contain impurities or degradation products, or you can also compare your method with some available pharmacopoeial method, or if suppose any other validated analytical procedure is available, then you can compare the data obtained by you with those available validated or pharmacopoeial method in case the impurities are not available with you. Then linearity and the range. I'll not go in details for this because these are the routine parameters that whenever you're doing up an analytical method that you need to perform. So linearity has to be within a given range. You have to establish the linearity to show that whatever concentration at which the analysis is being done, it would be directly proportional to the results that you obtain. That is important, and because or you can indirectly say that your method needs to follow the Beard's-Lambert's law in the concentration range which you are using for analysis. The recommended data that you need to establish is correlation coefficient, y-intercept has to be calculated, slope of the regression line has to be calculated, and the residual sum of squares need to be calculated. It is necessary that whenever you are establishing the linearity, minimum 5 concentrations should be used. You can go beyond 5 concentrations, but at least linearity should be performed for 5 concentrations. Then range, this is a broader perspective that in what range you have to show what is the interval between the upper and the lower concentrations of the analyte in the sample, and you have to perform experiment based on this. Generally, the minimum specified ranges which should be considered for different types of testings include, like whenever you are doing it for the assay of drug substance or the finished drug product, then concentration range use should be 80 to 120% of the test concentration. For content uniformity, the minimum of 70 to 130% of the test concentration should be utilized. For dissolution testing, you can use a concentration range of plus minus 20% over the specified range. And if the specifications for the controlled product, controlled release product are used, then also you can do it over the percent concentration of 20%. While you are doing it for the impurity, then you have to report the impurity up to the level of 120%. It's important to report it in those terms. This is a typical table that I have taken from the AOSC manual. So it shows that what is the what is the analyte concentration in terms of percentage, and what is the percent RSD value that you can accept. So you can see at the concentration is higher, the percent RSD that is acceptable becomes low. As you go on diluting the concentration, and you can say that you can see in the last column when the concentration is so low, like 10 raised to power 9, or you can call it as 1 parts per billion, the percent RSD becomes acceptable, percent RSD becomes as high as to the value of 30. Why? When the concentration, analyte concentration is 100%, then the percent RSD that is acceptable is 1.3. So this you have to percent RSD you have to calculate whenever the multiple concentrations are analyzed. Like say you are doing the 9 determinations or you are making the 6 determinations. So depending on what concentration you have used, you can claim that based on percent RSD that your analytical method is acceptable or not. Then detection limit and the quantitation limit, two very critical criterias, because you need to establish that to what concentration level the analyte can be detected and what is the minimum concentration that can be quantitated in your sample. So these two values, they are very critical in those terms, because if you are performing the experiment at a very low concentration, you need to understand that the detection, whether it is below or whether it is above the detection limit. And suppose you are interested in reporting the concentration or quantitative determination of these substances, this would be particularly important in case of when you are doing the impurity analysis or whenever you are doing the metabolite analysis. At that time, this detection would be very important to establish the detection limit and quantitation limit. So as per the definition, I'll just go with only one of the definition by ICH, that detection limit of an individual analytical procedure is the lowest amount of analyte in a sample which can be detected but not necessarily quantitated as an exact value. Generally, whenever the detection limits are to be expressed, you can express it in terms of percentage, or you can also express it as ppm or ppb, that is parts per million or parts per billion. And you have to keep in mind whenever the detection limit and the quantitation limits are determined. So for detection limit, the acceptable signal to noise ratio is 2:1 or it is 3:1. So that is you can say is a requirement. So you have to check it with the instrument also, that your signal to noise ratio should be 3:1. So that means signal should be 3 times of your noise level. Then you can say it to be as a acceptable detection limit as per both ICH as well as USB. Similarly, for quantitation limit, the definition goes in the same way as that of the detection limit. Only thing is that it is the value or minimum amount or the lowest amount of the analyte in your sample which you can quantitatively determine. Of course, keeping in mind that your method follows or it satisfies to the conditions of the accuracy and precision. The similar way, like the quantitation detection limit is expressed in different units, the quantitation limits can also be expressed in those similar units of percentage, ppm or ppb. Only thing you have to keep in mind that your acceptable signal to noise ratio for quantitation is 10:1. That means your signal should be 10 times higher as compared to the noise level of the instrument. So when you are performing the experiments for detection limit and the quantitation limit, for detection 3:1 and for quantitation the signal to noise ratio of 10:1 has to be kept in mind. Now there are different approaches. I will not talk about much on these approaches, that what are the how it is basically done. I'll just list out the names of the methods which are used. So you can do it. You can based on the visual evaluation. That means just by which you can visually evaluate. That is called as based on visual evaluation. Then you can do it as I earlier said, for detection limited the ratio is 3:1 for signal to noise, and for quantitation it is 10:1. For the quantitation limit signal to noise ratio, you can go for determination of detection limit as well as the quantitation limit. Third method, which is considered as more accurate and more reliable, which is based on stand. Of course, the method, second method is also very commonly used method for calculation of these two values. The third method is based on the standard deviation of the response and the slope, where the formula that is used is for detection limit, it is 3.3 sigma upon S, where sigma represents the standard deviation of the response and S represents the slope of the calibration curve. Similarly, whenever you are determining the quantitation limit, the formula becomes, because we have seen it, the ratio for detection limit for signal to noise is 3:1 for detection limit, and that's why the term 3.3 has been used. While in case of quantitation limit, it becomes 10 because the signal to noise ratio has to be 10:1. So the detection limit can be calculated as 10 into sigma upon the S, that is standard deviation and slope of the calibration curve. Now how to calculate the standard deviation of the response? So there are two methods. You can do it based on the standard deviation of the blank that you have or you have used, and you can also calculate it based on the calibration curve. So I will not basically highlight it on the calculation methodology over here. These are the approaches which you can use for quantitation and detection limit. And finally, it comes to robustness. Your method needs to be robust at all times. It's very important. So this parameter of robustness will actually indicate the capacity of your analytical method to be unaffected if smaller changes occur during whenever you are performing your method. These variations should not be deliberate ones. These type of changes normally can occur. Say for example, suppose you're using any mobile phase which is in the ratio of say mobile phase of methanol and water for example, and say it is in the ratio of 50-50. So while the experiment is being conducted and say experiment goes on for a period of 4 hours or 5 hours or so, in that case there are chances that the methanol may get volatilized over a period of time, and this may sometimes lead to minor changes in the ratio of methanol and water in the mixture. So these are not deliberate variations. So these kinds of variations are likely. So if suppose minor or smaller changes do occur, it should not be affecting your analytical procedure. So you need to check whether your method is robust or not. So typical variations normally which you can establish to prove that your method is robust one. You can check for the stability of analytical solutions. You can check for variations in the pH. You can check for the influence of variations in the mobile phase compositions. If different columns are used, if there are changes in the temperature, if the flow rate changes, if it's a process which involves some extraction, then the time of extraction, etc. Then say suppose you are checking it out with the different columns, you can go in for checking it with the columns of different lots, or you can check the columns which are supplied by the different suppliers. So these kinds of deliberate changes you can do, and you can check out that your method is robust one. Lastly, on my last slide, I have just put a data. Of course, this data is suggested by the ICH that what type of parameters need to be put on the validation record whenever you are doing it, identification of your analyte, when you are doing the testing for impurities, while you are testing the impurities, whether it is quantitative data or whether it is you are establishing the limits for the impurities, like you perform it in limit tests. So in those cases, you do not quantitatively determine the impurities, but you only establish that your impurities are within limits as per the acceptable concentration range. Or lastly, whenever you are doing it, the assay or dissolution or content or the potency determination. So you can see this chart shows that what type of methods can be used. So the minus sign, it will signify that this characteristic generally need not be evaluated. Plus sign, it will signify that this characteristic is normally evaluated, and so on. So based on this data, comprehensive information can be collected that what validation parameters, of course, these are the minimum parameters based on which you need to establish the data. But generally, whenever a new method is being developed and established by the industry, the establishment of the data for all types of characteristics which are listed out in ICH and the USP depends on what guidelines you are following. You have to establish the validation data, and at the time of regulatory submissions, this data for validation of all types of methods, or I can say every method which is used during the product life cycle, needs to be submitted to the regulators. So my side, this slide it represents the similar type of data. The earlier slide, it was as per the ICH, whereas this slide represents the data as per the USP. The ICH directly states about the type of method, whereas the USP has classified it as category 1, 2, 3, and 4. So category 1 includes analytical procedure for quantitation of major components of the bulk drug substance or active ingredient in finished pharmaceutical product. Category 2 includes the analytical procedures for determination of the impurities. Category 3 includes analytical procedure which is performed or done for performance characteristics, like you are doing the drug release studies or dissolution testing. And the category 4 includes the identification tests. So thank you everyone. This was a comprehensive overview as far as the involvement of the analytical method and the validation parameters is concerned. So as I earlier said, quality cannot be established unless and until you have properly validated analytical procedure. So your quality basically depends a lot on the quality of your analytical procedure. Thank you everyone.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable talk and such a great session. Now the session is open for discussion. I request all the participants to unmute yourself and ask the question directly, or you can post your questions in the WhatsApp group.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, can you just elaborate the significance of analytical method validation in pharmaceutical industry?
Yeah, I think in my initial few slides, as I said, right from the drug discovery process till the product is in the market, or even after the expiry of the product, you need to check the suitability of your dosage form. You need to check the suitability of your active ingredient, and this suitability cannot be checked or evaluated unless and until you have an appropriate method. Only appropriateness of the method is not important, but you need that your method should be a validated method. So that's why this validation is very critical at all stages of the product life cycle.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Anyone have any question? They can ask from the participants.
Yes, ma'am. I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, when we performing this LOD and LOQ, especially for the stability indicating assay method, or especially for the RS method, impurity method,
Yes, sir.
I always have a doubt that we should perform this LOD and LOQ for the main analyte or for the impurities which are getting generated.
No, it's done for the analyzer. We have to do it for analyze. Yes, but our when the main objective is impurities, and
Yes.
the main objective is determination of impurities or the degradation products. So that time it becomes your analyte. So then you have to establish the limit of detection and limit of quantitation for those constituents. Because as per the regulatory guidelines, you have or the regulators have given the guidelines regarding what is the acceptable concentration of the impurities. They have given this acceptability not only in terms of the concentration of the individual impurities, but they have also stated that impurities altogether also needs to be controlled. And generally this concentration, of course, this is based on in some cases that impurity should not go beyond 10 ppm. In some cases, the impurity should not go beyond 0.5% or so on. It depends on the type of impurity as well as the pharmacological activities the impurity is showing. So this cannot be established unless and until you have determined the limit of detection and limit of quantitation for that impurity or even for the degradation product. So that you have to do.
Madam, but in that case, now at the academic level, we are facing the challenge because without impurity standard,
Yeah.
it's difficult to establish the LOD and LOQ, and sometimes there are 3 to 4 impurities. So getting 3 to
Yeah.
4 impurity standard is almost impossible at academic
Yeah,
level.
I understand your question. At the academia level, we do face this problem. So one of the attempt is that is what we do in our laboratories or at our place or at our institute, that some of our students are working on attempt to synthesize some of these impurities. Suppose we are interested in establishing the concentration of these impurities, so we make an attempt that if we can actually develop a method for synthesis of these impurities in the purest form, and then once the purity of these impurities is established, then we make an attempt to use these impurities for quantitation of the impurities in the drug substances. So we can collect samples from different places, or maybe we can use these synthesized impurities for quantitation of the impurities from the drug products also.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you for answering my query.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
There is another query given by Dr. Padmanabhan.
Yes, sir.
He will ask that, Madam, can you elaborate on the specificity and the selectivity, whether they are the same or different?
Now, as per the ICH guidelines, as I have said, that specificity you need to perform, and this is done to establish that whether whenever you are determining your API from the metrics, like the formulation metrics, or maybe from the biological metrics. So interference of you can say the specificity is basically done to establish that there is no interference from these components which are present over there, right? While selectivity is something that it would be analyzing only the analyte of interest, and other constituents should not be analyzed at the same time. While you are doing this specificity, you can design your method in a way that even though say those matrix components are present, like suppose there are certain types of proteins which are present in the biological fluid, or even say when you are doing it from formulation, so there are excipients present. So it's likely that the wavelength that you are choosing may absorb the constituents from may absorb the at the same wavelength at which your API is absorbing. So this is likely to produce the interference. So while the method is being developed, you have to take into account, even though if they are absorbing at the same wavelength, you have to design your method in such a way that this interference is nullified. While when you are testing it for the selectivity, you have to check that the constituent on your method only quantitates or analyzes the analyte of interest. It does not quantitate your excipient, or maybe the interfering substances in the from the biological matrices. Okay, but yes, whenever you are performing it in the laboratory, you can generally the approaches remain same whenever you are performing the experiment for selectivity and specificity.
Okay, thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful session.
Thank you, sir.
Over to Anagha.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Now, I would like to request Miss Snehal Astekar, ma'am, to sum up the today's session.
Thank you, Vijaya. Actually, I feel honored to sum up my PhD guide session, Dr. Mrs. N.M. Bhatia ma'am. Ma'am has started her session with how analytical methods plays a very crucial role in product lifecycle management. She also explained about validation protocol, method validation, and US FDA guidelines. Then she wonderfully cleared few concepts of method validation and what is revalidation, what are pharmacopoeial and non-pharmacological methods and how these methods should be validated. Briefly, she introduced us about some important ICH, ISO, IEC guidelines and validation parameters. Also, ma'am talked about types and steps involved in analytical method validation, in which she emphasized about validation methods for quality purpose of the product. Then she stressed out some examples of methods like chromatography and newer technologies that requires validation documentation. Also, she made us aware about recent validation requirements under GMP and FDA. She concluded finally her session by meaning that to get good quality products, the method we have selected should be accurate, precise, specific, robust, and it should be validated. With this brief, I would like to thank you, Dr. Mrs. N.M. Bhatia ma'am, for enlightening us about regulatory aspects in analytical method development. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, ma'am. Now
Thank you.
I will request all the participants to turn on your camera so that we can have photo with our eminent speaker. Okay, thank you everyone. We'll
Thanks,
soon be,
everyone.
yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Dear participants, we'll soon begin with our validatory function. So please stay connected.
Thank you so much, madam.
Thank you so much, sir.